Now, I have the distinct honor to invite U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Western Hemisphere, Daniel Erikson, to the stage. DASD Erikson is responsible for U.S. defense and security policy for 34 nations, including Canada, Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean, and South America. DASD Erikson, sir, it's a pleasure to have you.
Good morning. I'll try it one more time. Good morning. Great to see everyone here. I'm really thrilled for the opportunity to be with you all here today. This is not my first FIU 8th annual or first annual Hemispheric Security Conference, but it is the first I've attended in person in this position. My prior interventions have been virtual, and I did have an opportunity to attend previously before I started at the Department of Defense. I do want to start out by thanking Florida International University for the invitation. There are so many luminaries and dignitaries in this room. I'm not going to recognize everyone, but instead borrow a phrase I learned from some of my friends in the Caribbean, which is all diplomatic courtesies extended. And you all know who you are. This conference has, over time, become one of the key venues for discussing some of the most pressing, cross-cutting security issues facing Latin America and the Caribbean. I think the conference theme is very apt: partnerships in the decisive decade. There's no question that we are living in a decisive period of time. And of course, for the United States, our allies and partners will be absolutely essential to maneuvering through this period. The Biden-Harris administration's vision for U.S. policy in the Western Hemisphere seeks a future that is democratic, prosperous, middle class, and secure. And our national security strategy calls on us to deepen our partnerships across the region based on principles of mutual respect and equality, a commitment to democratic governance, economic prosperity, security, rule of law, and respect for human rights and human dignity. However, as has been alluded to already, and as we will explore over the next day and a half, this hemisphere is facing an increasingly complex and rapidly evolving security environment. We're fortunate to live as neighbors in a hemisphere of peace, but we also must be candid about our common challenges. And while this is a hemispheric peace, I think that we also know that there are growing risks that we face that are posed by a range of different challenges that include transnational criminal organizations, cyber actors and cyber threats, external state actors that are seeking to become more prominent in this region, as well as the risks that are posed by natural disasters, climate change, and of course, the challenges of governance that we see in many countries throughout the region, which threaten both the security and the prosperity of this region. If we just reflect back on what has changed in this hemisphere since this gathering met approximately a year ago, the hemisphere has moved through an election super cycle where you've had many very significant elections that have taken place in some of the most important countries in the region, including Brazil and Mexico, among others. You also have a scenario where widespread migration is continuing throughout the region, posing challenges not just to civilian and law enforcement agencies, but also to militaries and defense institutions. There also has been an increasing prevalence of criminal actors that are exploiting new vulnerabilities and new seams and exploiting new profit areas as well. All of this means that now we need to work even more committedly to ensure that the hemisphere remains one that is secure. And over the past year, I've had the opportunity to travel fairly extensively in the region, to the southern cone of South America, to Canada, to most places in between, including Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean. And I think that while we have a range of different political tendencies that are represented today in the governments in the region, there is a common recognition of the need for improved security. People want countries that are safe. They want communities that are safe. They want their families to be safe. They want they themselves to be safe. And I think that one thing that we can look at this conference and moving forward are what are the mechanisms that we have today to ensure and uphold the safety of citizens throughout the hemisphere. And that includes, of course, what can be done by national police forces and the judicial branches of government, but also what's the appropriate role of defense ministries and of the armed forces. Last year, I had the opportunity to travel to Brazil with Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin for the 15th Conference of Defense Ministers of the Americas. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with this gathering, it's a once every 2-year gathering of defense officials from throughout the Americas who meet to discuss common challenges, common threats, and common partnerships to move forward. During our visit to Brazil, Secretary Austin had the opportunity to not just address the plenary session, but engage in bilateral meetings with counterparts from Brazil, Ecuador, Chile, Colombia, as well as to have conversations with his counterparts from Mexico, Dominican Republic, Honduras, and others. And through those conversations, we learned that the United States is still very much seen as an important partner, an important reference point, but also that there's a sustained commitment from countries throughout the region to work more closely with us. And for the Department of Defense, this is an essential characteristic of this region, one that we do not take lightly, that we do not take for granted, and we are extremely committed to deepening these partnerships with countries from throughout the Americas. One of the concepts that Secretary Austin outlined in his address at the Conference of Defense Ministers of the Americas is the importance of integrated deterrence. Integrated deterrence, which is a core tenet of our national defense strategy, is intended to address emerging threats from both state and non-state actors and to deepen partnership across all domains, including land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace, in order to ensure that this hemisphere and indeed this world will remain one that is largely secure. The meeting last year also took place against the backdrop of war. The Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has had important impacts not just on that region of the world, not just on Europe, but of course has been felt deeply as well in this hemisphere, as you've seen the impacts on food prices, on fuel prices, and on the need for countries to think more deeply about their own international relations and take a look at what side are they on. We understand not every country has made a clear decision on that point as we would like, but nevertheless, we are gratified for the support that has come from some aspects of this hemisphere for the importance of the Ukrainian mission that the government is undertaking. Now, last year, the Secretary Austin also announced over $115 million in fiscal year 23 funding to build partners' defense capabilities, which builds on nearly $500 million of U.S. security assistance that we've provided to this region since 2020. Last fall, the Department of Defense also deployed the U.S. naval ship Comfort. This is a hospital ship that traveled throughout the region, seeking to alleviate the strain on partners' medical systems. It undertook important medical missions in countries including Colombia, Guatemala, Honduras, the Dominican Republic, and Haiti. Secretary Austin also underscored our commitment to women, peace, and security, and volunteered the United States to host the next working group on this topic over the next year. Now, Looking forward, I think that one of the challenges that we see as being very pervasive in this hemisphere are the risks of conflict in the gray zone. And by the gray zone, I mean that zone that is below the threshold of war, but yet is taking on more aggressive elements. And this includes attacks that are not necessarily at the threshold of conventional war, but they can take place in the cyber domain and in other domains. I know that cyber will be a key feature of this conference, that this is a topic that some of the panels will be addressing later on today and tomorrow. We see state and non-state actors as deploying advanced technological tools that, while they're ultimately low cost, they also can have far-reaching impact that destabilizes societies. The scope and pace of malicious cyber activity in this region continues to grow, with new threats and attacks on both government and non-government institutions. These include hackings, misinformation, ransomware, other subversive activities that threaten our national security, counter international norms, and threaten to undermine global stability. In the Western Hemisphere, we are working to improve how we train, exercise, and operate alongside our regional partners in order to enhance our security in cyberspace, both domestically and regionally. A core tenet of this strategy involves forging deeper partnerships. We in the United States seek a world where responsible state behavior in cyberspace is expected and reinforced, and where irresponsible behavior is isolated and costly. We think any solution to the challenges that we're facing in cyberspace can only be found through addressing this challenge as a whole of government effort, and indeed a whole of nation effort. We remain committed to an open, interoperable, secure, and reliable information and communications infrastructure, which supports international trade and commerce, fosters free expression and innovation, and strengthens international security. Another challenge that we see as being increasingly pressing in this region is the threats and risks posed by the environmental impacts of climate change. And indeed, we have seen over the recent years, whether it's the hurricanes that struck Central America in 2020, hurricanes Eta and Iota, rising floodwaters, forest fires, or even the environmental impacts that have been inflicted by transnational criminal organizations, such as through illegal mining, illegal logging, that more and more of the partner armed forces in the region and the defense ministries are focusing on the environmental impacts on their own national defense and national security. Last year, the Department of Defense hosted a tabletop exercise called Precipitous Storm that sought to explore how these trends will impact our security over the next 15 years and what new tools and resources we could bring forward to address it. I know that in my travels around the region, when I engage with partner militaries and defense ministries, many of them bring to us unsolicited the very deep concerns that they have in this area and the ways that they are working to ensure that their countries are protected from environmental damage, which also has a human cost and an economic cost. Looking forward, we are excited to see what new capacities we can bring to this important problem set. It's one that is taken very seriously by most of the countries in the region, and one where I think that moving forward, there's a lot more that can be done. I know that we'll be discussing this here today as well. And so in conclusion, I really just wanted to share that the Department of Defense is present, engaged, active in this region. We believe that there's no such thing as an unimportant partner, and that every partnership deserves respect and our investment and a way to work forward together. Later today, we'll be fortunate to hear from Southcom Commander General Richardson, as well as the military Deputy Commander, Admiral Halsey, who will also be able to share their view from U.S. Southern Command in terms of how the command is seeking to engage with partners in the region and how we can both bilaterally and collectively advance our security. I think that while the risks that we face are clear, so are the opportunities that we are very gratified by what we see as a very deep commitment and political will in many countries in this region to continue to deepen and expand their relationship with the United States. We listen very intently to our partners and seek to meet with them where they are at. And I think that working together, we are going to manage to forge a hemisphere that is more democratic, more prosperous, more secure, continually at peace, and one that can also really withstand some of the pressures that we see in other parts in the world as you have autocratic powers that are forcing to impose their will on their neighbors or on countries across the globe. We are confident that the United States, with a forward-leaning posture, can ensure that that is not the case here. So with that, thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to listening to some of the great minds that are listed in the program later today. And I wish everyone a successful conference. Thank you.